As many will know, back last March, before the world descended into craziness, we had our own little mini outbreak here in the church. And a number of us, Sarah and I included, fell poorly. At the time, we thought it was COVID, but there wasn't mass testing. There was no way of confirming it, and so we were just not quite sure. But what we did notice, a few days into this illness, Katie, our daughter, sent us a care package. She sent us a box, and in it was a lovely smelly candle that had absolutely no smell to it. I thought, what a rubbish candle. And she sent me this beautiful box of tandoori coated peanuts. They were just the blandest thing I'd ever eaten. So what shop was she going to? And then a couple of days later, we started to we talked, and we realized actually neither of us could taste or smell. And I think a week later, then that became a recognized evidence of COVID, to lose your smell and your taste. It was an official marker. Well, in our passage today, we're looking at John in his letter. He outlines two, and he does a third one in another passage, two markers or two evidences of Christians. If you're a believer, this is what you should be like. And the two I'm looking at today is, do we live like Jesus, and do we love like Jesus? And John says, if you're a true believer, you will live like Jesus, and you will love like Jesus. Let me start, and I'll read the first bit. And it worked earlier, I need to do it, but it's not working now. So let's read 1 John chapter 2, verses 3 to 6. And we can be sure that we know him if we obey his commandments. If someone claims, I know God, but doesn't obey God's commandments, that person is a liar and is not living in the truth. But those who obey God's word truly show how completely they love him. That is how we know we are living in him. Those who say they live in God should live their lives as Jesus did. Now, living like Jesus doesn't mean just behaving like him. It's not about a list of behaviors. I'm not going to give you a list of, if you're going to live like Jesus, you must do this and this and this and this. That's legalism. We're not going to go there. Living like Jesus means you display the character of Jesus. That he is, all that you do just oozes Jesus. Let me give you a little bit of basic Greek. The word character. Do you want to learn a Greek word? The word character in Greek is character. There you go. You've learned a little bit of Greek. And what it relates to is, if you can think of a pot, the maker of the pot would put his mark on the bottom of the pot to say, this is mine, I made this. He would put his character on the bottom of the pot. And so a character is an outward sign of ownership. It's an outward sign of all the values that person made that pot for. Our character should be an outward sign of all that God, that we belong to God, but also all that he has placed in us, is an outward working. Because you see, order is important here. John, in this letter, he says, we can be sure that we know him if we obey his commands. He doesn't say, obey his commands and then you'll know him. He doesn't say, obey his commands so that you can get to know him or you can approach him. He says, if you know him, you will obey his commands. You will just be like him. The order is important. We know him, therefore we obey him. It's not that we obey him to know him. In other words, this is a phrase you'll hear often in a church or Christian context. It's inside out. The gospel works inside out. It starts inside me, and it's my heart that is changed. And that then starts to outwork over time around my behaviors and my character. Jesus spoke quite clearly about this, didn't he? When he was speaking to the Pharisees, and he used the phrase, "you whitewashed tomb." On the outside, you look nice and clean and tidy. Inside, you're rotten, you're dead. He wasn't very complimentary about people that behave in that way or exhibit life that way. Nice and shiny to everyone else, but inside, we're dead. The gospel is inside out. It's about working in the heart. You know, if your outside isn't that nice and clean and tidy, it doesn't matter. It's what is happening in your heart. Because as your heart is changed, as your heart becomes more Christ-like, you will become more Christ-like. But if you try and just follow a list of, to be Christ-like, I must do this and this and this and this, you're likely to end up with a rotten heart inside. We work inside out. In our last series, Shelley picked up on a verse from Psalm 46 quite a few times. And it happens to be one, if you've joined me in a Zoom meeting, you'll have seen it on the back of my office, a beautiful painting that Sarah has painted and created that's in my office. Be still and know that I am God. And I just feel that I want to take that verse, but I want to turn it around. Know that I am God and be still. Because what we tend to do, as soon as I start talking about lifestyle and living and behavior, we strive. We then think, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to stop doing this, I need to change that. I think what God would say to us is, know that I'm God and be still. Allow me to work through you. Allow me to change you. Know that I am God. That's the important bit, our hearts. Be still, and God will then work through you, and he will bring out the gold and the good in you. Don't strive to obey. Be still. Don't battle through to obey. Be still. Because he is God. And if it's in our heart, he will change us. And the other side about being still, I will give you a little practical tip, is to practice the pause. You know, most of the times when the old self comes out, the non-Christ-like self comes out, is because we react too quickly. I think there's almost the old man in us, the old person in us is quick. The Christ in us is more stately, is slower. So what do I mean by that? Well, we read an email or we read a post on Facebook, and suddenly we're wound up with wood thought, and it's the old self that's coming out. What I would say is the be still part is practice the pause. Pause. Wait. How should I respond? And allow the Christ in you to come out rather than the old self of you coming and crashing through. There is something so powerful about pausing before you respond. It's much easier to pause than it is to take words back. Be still and know that I am God. That's what it means to live like Jesus. Let's move on and look at love like Jesus, and let's just carry on in the passage. Dear friends, I'm not writing a new commandment for you, rather it's an old one that you've had from the very beginning. This old commandment to love one another is the same message you heard before, yet it is also new. Jesus lived the truth of this commandment, and you also are living it, for the darkness is disappearing and the true light is already shining. One more, thank you. If anyone claims I'm living in the light but hates a fellow believer, that person is still living in darkness. And anyone who loves a fellow believer is living in the light and does not cause others to stumble. But anyone who hates a fellow believer is still living and walking in darkness. Such a person does not know the way to go, having been blinded by the darkness. I loved the family time. Thank you, Graham and grandkids. Just to illustrate what it's like if we're walking in this darkness. And I'm not going to go into all of this. There's a lot we could cover around things, but I just want to look at a few things about what does this, few words in here. First of all, this old and new. There's a sense here, John's saying this is an old commandment. It's been there all the way through because God is love. And in fact, we can go back right the way back to the beginning, Leviticus 19, verse 18, and it says the following: "Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against one of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." It's an old commandment. It's been there right from the beginning. But there's also a sense that what Jesus does is he tends to take the old and then adds to it, enhances it, brings it into something, into a stronger or a more radical position. So let me pick up on something like Matthew 7, verse 12, where Jesus said, "So in everything, do to others what you would have do to them, for this sums up the law of the prophets." So he's reiterating that same sort of thing. But then we jump on to John 13:34, and it says, "A new command I give you, love one another." Well, isn't that the old command? But then Jesus adds this word, "as I have loved you." Oh. That's the extra bit. Love one another as I have loved you. How has Jesus loved us? Well, I think it's a radical love. It's a radical love that pushes the boundaries of all that we're thinking. Back in Matthew, Jesus said in Matthew 5, verse 43, he says, "You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Jesus brings a radical element to what it means to love. In John 15, he talks about love means laying down your life for your friends. He talks about this sense that love is sacrificial. To love within the church context means that we love and we don't count the cost. We don't go, "Well, look, I've loved them loads. Do I have to keep loving them?" Yes. You don't count the cost. You don't think, "Hang on a minute, I've given you X amount of love. You now need to give me some back." We don't count the cost. Loving radically and loving sacrificially means that we love and we go the extra mile. Jesus had that lovely image of, pick up the coat. If someone says, "Carry my coat for 1 mile," carry it for 2. Go the extra mile in loving each other. Don't just drop a meal on a doorstep, but what extra can you do? How further can you take that sacrificial love? And the other side I see in the love that Jesus shows is unconditional love. I love you because it's the right thing to do. Not because of what I get back. Not because of you behaving in the right way. I don't love you if you behave the right way, and then if you don't behave in the right way, sorry, I'm not going to love you anymore. Unconditional love says, I love you, full stop. I love you if you do the right thing, but I'll also love you if you do the wrong thing. That's how we need to be as church. This is a bit of a tricky one. I love you even if you hold slightly different theology to me. I wonder if church splits have happened in the past, not because of theological differences, but because of lack of love. Because if there's love, we can sit down and we can talk and we can discuss and we can debate and we can still agree to disagree, but we love. I see too much hate happening across church, not this church necessarily, but across the church world. We need to be loving as Jesus loved. Radical love, sacrificial love, unconditional love. Paul talks about this love as well, doesn't he, in 1 Corinthians. If you want a yardstick, what does it mean to love? Let's just have a look at the 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. This is how we should love one another. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. That is how we should be showing love to one another. Now, I could take this to 5 ways to live more like Jesus and 5 ways to love more like Jesus. But you know what that does is that just turns it into a tick list of, am I doing the right things? That becomes legalism. It's got to flow out of our relationship. And the key isn't, am I doing the right things? The key is, do I love Jesus? Because if I love Jesus, then out of that will flow all of these things. You know, last March, when we had COVID and we had those 2 indicators, the scientists haven't worked for the last 15 months to develop a vaccine that will solve my loss of smell and taste. It did come back eventually, about 5 months later, but that's not what the vaccine was about. The vaccine was about tackling the root cause. If we are sat here thinking, well, I don't live like Jesus enough and I don't love like Jesus enough, it's not about how do I change those. They're the indicators. Go to the root cause. And the question is, do I love Jesus? And I've been really challenged over the last 2 weeks as I've been thinking about this. And let me make a confession. I think I focus too much on serving. I serve God. I serve God because it's the right thing to do. I serve him because that's what he wants me to do. And it's partly my character is a driven character. It's a doing. I'm a doing person. And I've been challenged, almost like Jesus challenged Peter, do you love me? Full stop. Not do you love me and then get on and do this, all these activities. Do you love me? And I have really been challenged by that question. Do I love Jesus? Well, yes, I do. But is that my motivation? Or is my motivation about serving him? You see, what should happen if I love Jesus? It talks about in the Bible, he will place his law in our heart. As I love Jesus, he will place his law and his commands in my heart. And that means I will start to do the things he wants me to do. And if I love Jesus, and out of that will overflow, because I will start to see people as he sees them. And then when you start to see others, not through a tick list of how should I be loving, but when you start to see people through the eyes of Jesus, you cannot but love them. No matter how difficult or awkward or annoying they are, you see them as God sees them, as Jesus sees them, and all you can do is love them. Everything flows out of this as we understand that it's not about the doing, but it's about the being. Being in love with Jesus. And I think I haven't said that enough. I don't know if I've ever stood here on this stage and said, I love Jesus. Feels a little bit awkward for a bloke to say that about, but actually that's got to be what I'm about. I love Jesus. And when our relationships are going through difficult times, what do? We invest into them. And we have a date night. Now, I'm not saying have a date night with Jesus. That sounds very weird, doesn't it? But isn't that what a quiet time is? Isn't that what a retreat or a walk in the woods, and just to be able to think and mull over his words? Do you remember that lovely phrase that came out in the well-being journey? One of the guys said, I take a Bible verse for a run. Well, that, if you like, is a bit like the date. Let me just take some of the words of Jesus and let me just mull on them and go for a walk and think about them. So I just want to leave us with that question. Do you love Jesus? And it's not about a hierarchy of how much you love him or how passionate you are. The question is, do you love him? Is he there in your heart? Have you allowed your heart to be transformed? Stop focusing on what you have to do and start focusing on him and love him. I'm going to invite Hilly, Graham up, but let me just pray. In In Ezekiel, we looked at this a few years ago, didn't we? In Ezekiel, it says the following. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. And I just want to pray a little bit of heart surgery today. Do we need to let go of our old stony heart? Our religious heart, our heart that's fixated on doing, and just allow God to place in us a heart that just is in love with him. Because as we love him, all these things will follow. Let's pray. Jesus, I pray for my heart. And I pray you will take away the hardness or the focus on performance or the focus on doing, and place in me an increasing heart that just loves you because of who you are. And I pray for my brothers and my sisters here in this room watching on the video. And I pray where we have a heart that has become hard or cold, I pray you would place into us that heart of flesh, that heart that just beats your beats, that heart that just oozes your love. And help us to fall afresh in love with you, Jesus. I thank you that you are patient and kind and trustworthy. And I pray all those words in that beautiful list that Paul writes will be true for us as we love you and as we love one another. But Jesus, help us to fall back in love with you. Amen.